Are you considering doing a full Stage 1 upgrade on your Harley Davidson touring motorcycle, but you might be a little intimidated? Or have you taken it to the dealer to get an estimate and were shocked as to how much labor it was going to cost to do a full Stage 1? Guys, my name is Rick and this is the HD Vibe channel. And what I put together for you today is a full tutorial on how to do a complete Stage 1 upgrade on your Harley Davidson touring motorcycle, including a full exhaust system. If you follow these step-by-step instructions, this will take away any intimidation you have of doing this yourself. And if you do it yourself by setting aside enough time, you will save at least $1,000 in labor. And the way this video is broken up is into 4 parts. The first part will be how to install a high flow breather. The second part will be how to install a tuner. The third part will be how to install a full exhaust system, which that is replacing the headers and adding slip-ons to your motorcycle. And finally, the fourth part of this video, which I think is really cool, is me doing a test run on the motorcycle after I've completed the full Stage 1 upgrade so that you guys can see, one, how it performs, and secondly, how it sounds. And we'll get into it right after this. Welcome to part 1. This is how to install a high flow breather on your touring motorcycle. In order to install this ventilator kit, there's a couple things that we need to do before we even get into installing. So one, we need to remove the seat, and we actually need to remove the tank, which that might sound intimidating, but it's really not that bad. It's basically 2 bolts, one on the right and the left. And then there's a bolt right here underneath your seat. If you've had your seat off, you've seen this. And there's some connectors. I think there's one electrical connection you disconnect. It just snaps apart, and some hoses and you pull it off. It's best to do this when your tank is probably more empty. Unfortunately, I have mine filled up completely because it is winter time and I don't want to get any condensation in the tank, so it's going to be a little heavier. But you really need to take that tank off because there is a bracket that sits behind this stock clamshell breather cover that needs to come off so that there's enough space for this ventilator kit to get in there. So with that, let me get this set up and I'll pull this tank off, and then we will get into removing and then start to install this ventilator kit from Harley Davidson. So now I've gotten both of the bolts off up in the front by the neck here. And then actually I was mistaken, there's actually 2 bolts down here and they all are 9/16. And then on the Road King special, the speedometer connection actually is under here. So you do underneath on the left side of the tank. So you do need to disconnect that, and then hopefully this tank should come right off. So, oh yeah, you do need to disconnect your fuel line. I almost forgot. So that's pretty simple. On the left side of the tank, almost by the seat, there's a little silver colored connection. You just push up on that and then pull the fuel line out, and then the tank should come right off. So the first step is we'll remove this bolt, and I believe this is a number 8 Allen wrench. Let's see, lefty loosey. Remove that, and that will get this cover off of here. And then this will reveal the stock air clip. So now I remove these 3 bolts. This is actually a T27, and this is to remove the stock air filter itself. These are not real tight, so they come off pretty simply here. Twist these out, and like I said, I would save all of these bolts as well as all the components, so that if you do want to ever go back to a stock configuration, you can do that. Blowback tubes are connected here. You just pull it off out of there. It was just slipped in through that little hole, running any blowback of oil into there. So now what you have here, this is the actual throttle body. That's what controls how much air is going into the engine. We'll pop these off, and these are called breather bolts. And so as you can see, I don't know if the camera's picking up, but there's actually a hole in these bolts, and that's how that gets any blowback coming out of there and coming back into the engine. So to remove these, this is actually a 7/16, and I'm going to use a deep well socket so I can get over that breather nozzle that comes out of there. And then we'll just loosen these up. And I should say the Screaming Eagle ventilator kit does come with instructions, but it's really pretty straightforward. And I'm pretty much walking you through all of the steps to remove and then add the new kit. And as you can see, it has a little bit of Loctite on there, and we'll Loctite all of these when we replace these with the new bolts from the new kit. So then that reveals the entire throttle body. So the piece that I needed to get to that I couldn't when the tank was on is actually this piece here. This bracket needs to be removed so that there's enough air for that wider air cleaner to go on there. So next we'll remove these, I believe these two bolts, that will take that off. And then, okay, so these are actually a 3/16 Allen. So we'll go ahead and get those loosened up. There we go. Those were in there pretty good. And while I'm doing this, guys, if you like this type of content and this channel where I do tips, tricks, rides, reviews, and product installs like this on my Harley Davidson touring bikes, I ask that you please hit the subscribe button. Actually, after a little further inspection, this is actually one of those Christmas tree plugs that kind of goes through this bracket. So I'm just gonna pull it out. There we go. There we go. Got it out. So that's the bracket we needed to remove, and what that does is it'll give some extra space. And I do recall from when I did this on the Street Glide special, you do need to make sure that this cable stays back in here. It is wrapped in heat resistant tape. So now that really sets this up for the install of the new housing for the ventilator kit. So before we actually get into it, so as you can see, this kit does come with a complete set of instructions. So the removal part is pretty basic. I kind of walked you through all that. And then this is where they're showing to remove that backing bracket because it will impede actually getting the new ventilator kit on there properly. And then the instructions really start on the bottom of page 1. And then they go really steps 1 through 8, and then the cover element installation. So really the first step here is we've got to align this backing plate, and there's actually a gasket that goes on here on the back of this plate so that you don't get air or moisture coming into that throttle body. Okay, so I went ahead and I peeled off the back, and I'm just pressing this gasket onto this backing plate. And I think line this back up. I believe that is the right way. There we go. So we'll get those started by hand. This one. And just be careful so that you don't cross thread these. Okay, so the instructions say to leave all of these relatively loose. So what I found was actually my throttle body had cocked a little bit, and so it was generating some challenge here to try to get these bolts that go straight into the actual housing itself. But so I got that squared away. Tighten this up by hand, and then I will get these torqued to the proper torque spec. So the torque spec for the breather bolts is 22 to 24 foot-pounds. These 3 bolts here are 55 to 60 inch-pounds. So I will go ahead and get these torqued down to torque spec, but again, I've got blue Loctite in those, so we should be okay. Everything is fitting good now. We have a good seal right around here, around the throttle body, so that we don't have anything sucking in through there, moisture or the like. So let me go ahead and get these torque spec down, and then okay, so now I've got everything torqued in, the breather screws and these the air filter screws. And then what we do need to do is we need to put these rubber breather hoses on, and essentially they just pop over the breather screws, and then there's a little tab right there that goes on. And then we have the same for the other side. This one actually, and then they just kind of pop into place. And again, that's if you do get any blowback of oil through the heads, that'll push it back into the engine, and hopefully, but if you have your oil levels set correctly, you typically won't have any issues with that. Essentially what you need to do at this point, after you've gotten the breather hoses on, is pop on your air cleaner, then pop on this cover, and then these bolts actually go through here to hold all of this together. And this is a T25, and I've got some blue Loctite on these so that they don't come loose. And then the last piece of this will actually just be to put the actual Screaming Eagle faceplate on. Okay, and so the last part of this installation is to put the Screaming Eagle cover on. This is, in this case, your only option. I'm sure you could probably buy a 114 or something like that, but obviously since I didn't have the ventilator kit on here to begin with, my 114 nameplate or tag will not fit. And there you have it. So that's really the install of the ventilator kit. And that's what it looks like when it's completely installed. Again, you have this entire area of the filter exposed so that you can get more air into the engine. As I mentioned at the onset of this video, rain sock actually comes with this ventilator kit, and so you essentially, if you think you're going to hit some wet weather, or you actually can just leave it on all the time if you like. It's not the most attractive thing, but it will stop any moisture from potentially getting into the throttle body and going into the engine. Okay guys, so that is the install of the Screaming Eagle ventilator breather kit. So as you can see, it's pretty simple, just a few simple tools. Probably the most difficult part was actually just removing the tank, and that wasn't really all that difficult. It just added a few minutes to the project. But so as I said, this is part 1 in this series. So in part 2, what I'm actually going to do next week is we'll release a video that goes over the tuning. And as I said, I'm using the Fuel Pack 3 by Vance & Hines. There's a number of reasons that I decided to go with this one, but most of all, I'm familiar with it, and it actually is very convenient to use. It stays on the bike, and I actually control it through an app on my phone. Welcome to part 2. as I will show you how to install a Vance & Hines FP3 tuner on your Harley-Davidson touring motorcycle. Guys, this is the Fuel Pack 3 tuner that I'll be installing on the Road King Special. I actually got this from Get Lowered Cycles, and I'll have a link in the description. They do not sponsor this. This is not a sponsored video, but they do have great prices. I actually picked this up on a Black Friday special a few weeks ago at like 20% off. So I think the list price is around $459 on this tuner. So as I mentioned, there's a number of reasons why I went with the Fuel Pack 3. The first and foremost is I'm very familiar with it because I do have it on the 2015 Street Glide Special. But also, I think for me, more importantly, is the ease of use. And as you'll see as I install this and we walk through the steps, the installation is super easy. And what I like most about it is that it actually connects to my smartphone through Bluetooth. And then I can actually control this tuner, and I can also monitor a lot of different settings on the bike that you can't typically monitor with the standard gauges. Do a number of tuning options with this, but what I will say with this tuner is once you do install it and it picks up the VIN on your bike, it is essentially married to that motorcycle. You cannot use this on another motorcycle once it's installed. So that may sound detrimental, and there's some other tuners out there that I think you can use on multiple bikes, but for the price point and the ease of use and the capabilities that this has and the support that you get from Vance & Hines, I think it's an incredible piece of equipment that you can add to your bike. The other thing is you can continue to upgrade and change your tunes to get the right fuel and air mixture for your setup. So you'll see once I get into installing this, but my point is with this tuner, right now, I'm going to have the high flow breather that we did in the previous video, which I'll have a link to that if you haven't seen that video yet. But I can set this for that heavy breather and having slip-ons only. And then I will also have a part 3 to this stage 1 upgrade, and that will be actually adding Cobra Pro Chamber header pipes. So I will get rid of the catalytic converter on this bike and really open it up. And so what I can do right now is tune to the setup that I have now, and then I can change the tune when I get the new headers installed and have more air flowing through this so that I still do get the right mixture of fuel and air for this motorcycle to run cooler and more efficiently. So I get the bike set up and we will install this FP3 tuner. So before you start this installation process, you do need to download, as I mentioned, the Fuel Pack 3 app in your app store. So you just type into your app store FP3 or Fuel Pack 3 and you'll find it and you'll pull it up, and you just need to go ahead and install that. So that's step number 1. And then when you actually get over to the bike, you need to take your clutch side cover off if you're looking at a touring bike. And you'll see this gray plug right here. This is your data port. So this is a direct connection into the ECM of your motorcycle. And this is really how, if the dealership needs to do any diagnostics on your bike, you're connecting a tuner, it goes right into this port. So you essentially just need to slide this off, and you can see there's a little connection. Pop off this cover, and there you have, you'll basically have, it's a 6-pin connector, and then you just take your Fuel Pack 3 module and you plug that in just like this, and you hear it click in. So then the next step is you turn on your bike And then you will see some lights flashing here. It's basically communicating. And then at the same time, you open up the app on your phone. The app on the phone will actually walk you through the installation process. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn on the bike. You do need to have Bluetooth turned on your phone. Right now, as you can see, it's searching for the Fuel Pack 3, and the fuel pack itself is actually flashing some green lights. So since I already had a Fuel Pack 3 from the other bike setup, I actually had to do a scan, and it found the new device. So I'm going to select that. Okay, so now it found the new device, and it is downloading the firmware for this fuel pack. We're going to install now. So it is going now over Wi-Fi through Bluetooth and connecting to the tuner itself. The tuner is still flashing. And the other thing I did forget to mention is that when you do this, you do need to have your kill switch in the on position, as well as turn your ignition switch to on. So it's updating here. It could take just a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, so now the firmware has updated. We're going to click here. It's actually loading the files onto the Fuel Pack 3. So what we're going to do is hit Map Lookup. Now it's asking for my exhaust. So I'm going to look through here. I don't know that my exhaust will be on here. I am going to put my Cobra. Okay, so neighbor haters, which is what I have. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select the Cobra neighbor hater 4-inch slip-ons with typical 212 duals, which is what the stock, and then a standard baffle, and then it obviously shows the 114 with a high flow air filter. We'll connect that, select that. And so it lists everything out. Again, the exhaust, the stock 114. So it's asking me, do I want to flash this map to the bike? And then it gives you a warning, and you continue through that. Basically it says this will affect your engine performance. Do you want to continue? So we continue. So now it's flashing the files. And linking the Fuel Pack 3 to the bike ECM. And then probably what it will do here shortly is once it does that, it'll actually ask me to turn off the bike for about 30 seconds. And you just heard the bike click on, so that means it's programming. And it does back up your original tune to the Vance & Hines server, so if you ever do want to go back to a stock configuration, all you need to do is back up, and I believe it'll list it in one of the within the app, and then you can pick that stock tune and put it back on if you ever want to go back to completely stock, which is another reason why I like the Vance & Hines. It's now flashing the new map to the bike. Okay, so now we turn the bike off for 15 seconds as it's resetting the ECM. Now it says turn on the bike. And again, you do need to leave your kill switch in the on position for this to operate properly. So it's trying to connect the Bluetooth again from the phone to the Fuel Pack 3. Okay, and that's it. So the new tune is on the bike. It's now ready to run again with the high flow breather and the slip-ons, and it's going to give me a good tune for that setup. And then the other, as I said, you can go into optimization. What Vance & Hines suggests is that you run the bike, at least 2 tanks through the bike with the new tune on it before you do an auto tune, because a 10% variability in how the engine can adjust itself. So here you can see, as I go in here, you can check, you can do throttle sensitivity. If I did put camshafts in there, you can remap with the camshafts, if you change injectors, engine, a speed limiter, so you can turn off the speed limiter on the bike through this Fuel Pack 3. You can also hit the rev limiter. I think the touring bikes have a rev limit of around 6,000 RPMs. I actually hit that the other day. Maybe it's 6,500. So you can actually turn that off. And then, as I mentioned, if you do ever get any decel pop, you have the option to adjust that sensitivity as well, and I'll kind of show you that. So here's if you get no pop, a little bit of pop, and a lot of pop. You can sort of dial this around to where you want to put it. So you have various sensitivities. So essentially that's in the off position with the X. I'm not going to do anything with that right now, but I just wanted to show you that. So then what I will do, as I said, you can keep this Fuel Pack 3 actually on the bike, and that's what I will do. So what I will do is I'll slide this back into the holder there, and then what I will do is actually just zip tie this in. I'll connect it so that it's protected, probably just about right in here. Zip tie that in, then I can put the cover back on, and then that can just stay on the bike, and then I can actually monitor what's going on with the bike as I'm riding down the road through the app on the phone. So that's really the install, and that's how easy it is, and that's about how I will leave the tuner on the bike. So guys, now I've got it all installed, so let's go ahead and fire up the bike. Got it in neutral, and let's listen to her roar. Sounds pretty good. So we're in the garage here, so I don't want to let it run too long, but so that's what it sounds like. She sounds like she's running well. I would get out and ride it, but it is about 10 degrees outside today, and we've had a little bit of sleet and snow on the rain. But you do, as I said, after you install the FP3, you upload the new map. You do want to go ahead and run a couple of tanks of gas through it. So you're looking at about 500 miles or so to get this thing, to get the engine to adjust to the new tune. And then if you like, after that, if you feel like there's something that's not exactly right, you can then run the auto tune feature, or you can also call Vance & Hines and give them your exact setup, and you can also upload the map and some of the readings that has been coming off of the actual tuner itself, and you can upload that to Vance & Hines, and they will take a look at the map. And I believe for no charge, they will also tweak your map and then resend the map to you that you can upload, that will even be a tighter tune for your exact setups. If you'd like to see more tips, tricks, rides, reviews, installs of my Harley Davidson Touring motorcycles, as well as information about motorcycles in the motorcycle community large, I should please hit that subscribe button. And when you do subscribe, please leave a comment down below saying I subscribe, so I can personally reach out and thank you for supporting the channel. Also, don't forget to hit that bell icon and select all, so you do get notified every time I do put out new content. So now let's get back to the video. Welcome to part 3, where I will show you how to install a complete exhaust system on your Harley Davidson Touring motorcycle. We are finishing up part 3 of the Stage 1 upgrade on the 2019 Road King Special. And part 3 is going to be the installation of Cobra Pro chamber headers, which I have here in front of me. So a lot of stainless steel, some black heat shields, some clamps, some instructions. Installing these headers is probably the most intimidating portion of a stage one, but really if you just take your time and follow these step-by-step instructions that I'm going to walk you through, that will save you a lot of money on dealer fees or shop fees in terms of labor. So as you can see here, I've removed the saddlebags, I've removed the brake side cover, I've already removed the slip-ons, and then I've begun removing the actual heat shields themselves, and I just have the one heat shield that's coming off of the front cylinder left to remove. In order to remove the front heat shield and the head pipe from the front cylinder, the front footboard on the right side of the bike needs to be removed, and that is really removed with an Allen, a 5/16 Allen with 2 bolts that I'll show you here in just a moment. As you can see, I removed the floorboard on the right side of the bike, and now I'll be able to go ahead and loosen up this heat shield, which I just have one more pipe clamp right here that I'll loosen that up, and then I'll be able to pop that heat shield off. So I've gotten all the heat shields off of the head pipes. As you can see, it's just the metal, bare metal now. So now I'll actually loosen this clamp, and then I will loosen the clamp on the crossover pipe, which is back here. And then that will allow me to then get up into the cylinders here where these head pipes actually connect in. Before we actually remove these head pipes completely, we do need to loosen the O2 sensor connectors here. And this sits right underneath your anti-lock brake mechanism here. And these just slide out. They're just quick disconnects. Mine are a little dirty. So that and that, so those slide off. So just for ease of use, the black O2 sensor is for the back head. So just remember back in black, and this gray one actually runs up to the front. And there's a few zip ties. There's one here, I think one here, and then underneath here for the front, it runs down. There's a few connectors underneath here. There's one zip tie. So you just loosen those zip ties, and then you feed these plugs back through, so that when you do release the head pipe off of the cylinder, everything can come with it, because you will reuse these O2 sensor connections on the new head pipes. The first bracket I'm going to release is this side bracket here, and this is actually a 1/2-inch socket that I'm using here, and that will release this bracket. This is where that crossover clamp is here. It is a 9/16, so I'm just going to go ahead and loosen this. A lot of these are pretty tight. Harley likes to use a lot of Loctite on these, but they're not so tight that it's impossible to get off. So I can't show you or get the camera under here very easily and also remove this, but this is a 1/2-inch bolt that's under here that is basically a hanger that's connected to the frame of the bike. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove that. And once I remove this bolt, this will actually, that wasn't very tight, it will actually then release this crossover pipe that goes to the left side of the bike. And you can save this clamp if you ever decide to go back to a stock configuration. That's the clamp itself. I've gotten the center bracket off, and I've loosened the pipe clamp connector, and I'm just going to wiggle off this crossover pipe, and hopefully that will come off. And there it is. It's the stock crossover that goes from the main portion of your stock header over to the left side of the bike. So essentially, again, it was just loosening this clamp that connected to 2 pipes, and then removing again this clamp that was in the center of the frame. So now I'm going to release these O2 sensor connectors. Just be super careful when you are clamping or snapping off these zip ties and kind of try to remember where the zip ties were. I'm going to kind of mark them if the bike's very dirty, but you just essentially just kind of feed them through here. You can see they come out through here. There's a zip tie here. The zip tie off. So as you can see, here is the O2 sensor, completely free for the back cylinder. It just goes right in here. So again, this is critical because you won't be able to pull these stock headers off unless you get these O2 sensors loose. Some people actually take the actual O2 sensors off. I've seen people do it. And then leave these all zip tied in. The only thing I don't like about that is you're trying to twist these wires and tighten them when this pipe is this header pipe is kind of almost on. I find it's just easier to just release them. You can always feed them back up through there and just kind of try to remember how they were routed, and you can just put them back. And I believe on these, the headers that I'm going to be putting on the Cobras, I think the O2 sensor placement is almost identical to the stock headers, so it should be perfect length to do this. Now, so now's the time that we've got the sensors we've got both sensors completely loose they go into the heads, and these are a 1/2 inch, and it is helpful on these if you do have one of these swivel head ratchets, but it's not completely necessary. It just makes it a little easier to get up in there. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to remove this back one first in here and just be a little careful on this. So, and they're not super tight. And yep, there we go. And that one was actually super loose. So once you kind of get those loosened up, you can almost do these by hand. I believe you do reuse these nuts that go into the bolts, and the bolts are actually in the head. A little tedious to get in there, but that's the bolt that's in there. Pretty basic. I'm gonna get this one off. Front bolt on this front head is fairly easy to get with the ratchet and the flexible head on that. So I don't know if you can see it, but this is the other bolt that I need to get to. I'm actually just going to do that with a old-fashioned wrench, I think. But in the meantime, like I said, I'm going to get a blanket to cover this. I'm probably going to turn the handlebars a little bit so that I have a little bit more room to work in here. And I may actually have to come in from this other side. I'm trying to, I think that's what I had to do when I did this on the Street Glide. But okay, so as you can see, I'm coming in from the other side of the bike. The camera's probably not picking this up very well, but I'm just getting in there and started that head bolt. And now actually I can get it by hand. They weren't really all that super tight. Now that I have the head bolts released, I've got this bracket has now come off. See, now the head pipe is loose, and you just kind of got to shimmy it off a little bit. There's these that hold those on there, and let me get the front one off. Got that one, and that should release the head pipe. I've got the head pipe off now. Actually had to disconnect the O2 sensor. There's a little connector right in here, and I'm going to work on that and get that off. But then there's these flanges that are on here. You just need to pop these off, and then you'll actually reuse this piece and this piece when you reinstall on the new head pipes. There's a little groove right here on the head pipe, and you just kind of gotta pop it over that and then work it around, and that's it. Those are a retaining clip. That's a retaining clip, and you will need to reuse that. And then this flange will come off. Here's everything that I need to then go ahead and start installing the Cobra Pro Chamber headers. So This, I believe, is a bracket that goes on the side of the bike. This is the crossover bracket. These pipe clamps are all for the heat shields. The large one goes toward the back of the heat shield. This is for the rear crossover, and there's some bolts in there. And in the back, they also have an instruction sheet, which I'm going to take a quick look at, but I'm pretty sure I know exactly what I need to do. First step is I'm going to reuse this nut. So what I'm going to do is just finger tighten this and have this hydraulic line behind, as that's what the instructions said for 17 through 20. And then what I found is you do need to just finger tighten this so that you do have a little play in there. So when you do put the head pipe on that actually connects onto this, you can get everything lined up properly. We're at the point where I need to reinstall the O2 sensor. So this is where the crossover is. This is the rear cylinder head pipe. And so again, remember, back is black, so I need to install the black O2 sensor. So this O2 sensor, and then you just need to basically just screw that in. Some people use anti-seize on this. I don't know that it really matters either way. And you don't need to like overly tighten them, but I would just get them tightened down enough so that they will stay there and not slide out. So just give them give it a good crank there and not go too crazy. And then the next thing I need to do is I need to install the flange. So again, remember, this portion is going into the head. So I need to make sure that I have this indented portion of this flange facing out. And then this retaining clip, I'll just get that slipped over, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to keep this head pipe on the bike. So I need to get it slipped over this little lip that's on this head pipe. You might need to stretch it out a little bit and kind of work it down. There we go, I got it in there. And so that's essentially how that needs to look once you get both of the flange and that stop on there. This is the front head pipe. That's obviously much shorter than the rear. Again, this is the gray O2 sensor goes to the front head pipe. So I'm going to hand tighten that, and then I will tighten that with a wrench. Again, you don't need to over tighten that. And I've gone ahead and installed the front head pipe, and I've tightened these. It's still fairly loose because I still need to get some play, but when you're doing these, make sure that you're tightening a little bit on each side, so you kind of tighten at the same rate, so that you don't get it over tightened on one side and not tight enough on the other. So at this time, you can start to kind of route your O2 sensor line. Again, these are almost in the identical position as the stock ones were. So now I've gone ahead and I've connected the rear head pipe into the cylinder as well. But in order to do that, I actually connected this support bracket onto the original bracket I put here. I had to loosen that up to get the angle right. I put these pipe clamps onto both the front portion of this crossover as well as the rear, with the head of that bolt facing down so that I can get to it and tighten it. And then I slid this rear portion onto the front and then aligned it up into the head, and then I lightly tightened each side of this so that it would fit good into the cylinder opening for the exhaust. I did go ahead and reroute the O2 sensor back along the original fittings. Here is the rear O2 sensor again. The back sensor is the black connection. And that just sort of routes up under here, around your oil filler, and zip ties here. So here's both of the sensor connectors. Again, this is for the front cylinder and this is for the rear. I think at this point I'm really fine to go ahead and reconnect these. So actually it's probably easier to do the back one first. Again, that's the black. Get it lined up and they clip in. You know it's in there when it snaps. And then I will do the front cylinder O2 sensor. Now I'll start working on the crossover pipe, which again is going to connect here. There's this pipe clamp here, just like you would see on your slip-ons. And then there's a clamp that goes underneath the bike and replaces the stock connection. This is the crossover pipe. And you can see it has the bracket built in here. And there is a bracket I need to connect to the bike. But essentially at this point in the instructions, it says I need to put this over here and then slip this into the head pipe and get it all the way in, which I think it is. And then the next step is going to be, and I don't want to tighten these clamps yet until I get everything lined up. And then I'm going to go underneath here and put on the bracket that will actually hold that crossover pipe in place, because essentially that will be the crossover pipe is where I connect the left side slip-on into. The pipe in now, and it's going to be hard for me to get the camera on there, but I basically need to put this bracket on now. Bolts that were already holding the stock bracket in that goes into the transmission there. I'll put these grommets into these holes, and then there's two supplied, these two screws that go in there along with some washers. Now the key is here, there's a smooth side and a rough side to these washers, and it says to make sure to put the smooth side up against these grommets here, these rubber grommets. I'm guessing so these are rubberized so that there is a little flex in there and that you don't get vibration. I've got the crossover pipe completely installed. Everything is still somewhat loose. Again, these are somewhat tight up at the heads. I'm going in there. But now the next step is I need to go ahead and install the slip-ons. And I will do that, and I think part of that is everything is still a little bit loose. I don't have any of these clamps tightened up yet, is to make sure that you can get good alignment on your slip-on. So I will go ahead and put the slip-ons. Again, I'm putting the Cobra Neighbor Haters on here, and I think this will give me a good sound. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've gotten the slip-ons put on. Again, these are the Cobra Neighbor Haters. I've measured the distance here to make sure that they're equal. And these pipes are just a little bit shorter than most pipes, so I actually slid these out just a little bit so that I do get a little more clearance from the bags, since I do have the stretch bags. I went ahead and hand tightened this connection here. All these connectors are now tightened up to the spec. I tightened up this clamp right here that holds this. I've now tightened up the head bolt going into the cylinders, and we're ready now to actually put on the heat shields. So I've got these oriented on, so on the left side of the bike, this is how the heat shield goes on. So I wanted to orient the screw heads downwards. So one of the things that's difficult when you're actually putting these on is to actually, because you're kind of blindly doing this, is to get this to line up with the actual clamp portion itself. So you kind of want to maybe bend this down right here with the pliers to get a little bend so it sort of naturally goes into that slot so that you can catch it once you start putting the screwdriver to it. So that's just a little tip. So I'm going to go ahead and put this side on. So the last step after getting all these heat shields tightened up with those pipe clamps that I showed earlier is to reinstall the front footboard. And it really is the reverse of what I did to uninstall it. You reuse the stock bolts And the only thing you do is put an 1/8 of an inch spacer in between the frame for this floorboard and the frame of the bike. So it does move it out just about an 1/8 of an inch, so you do have clearance for these new header pipes and this heat shield, because these are just a little bit wider than the stock, and so it gives you that ability to move that floorboard. Welcome to part 4, and now you're going to get to see how this motorcycle performs and what it sounds like after the Stage 1 upgrade.
Now I'm going to do the 0 to 60 run, and I'm going to screen record an app that I found that hopefully will do a good job of recording this. So here we go. That was 0 to 60. I don't know what the time was, but it's recorded and we will see what we got. I will tell you that was pretty quick from my perspective.
So that's it, guys. That's the step-by-step complete tutorial on how to do a Stage 1 upgrade on your Harley Davidson touring motorcycle. If you like this type of content, I'd appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up. Also, share this with your friends. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't subscribed as of yet. And also hit that bell icon and select all so you do get notified every time we do put out new content. And with that, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. Life is short. Get out and ride the bike. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye now.